You know what? If you freeze the chapati, actually it won't retrograde, because retrogradation happens only between like 3 and like 20, 30 Celsius. It does not happen at freezing temperatures. So the best way to keep your bread or sourdough bread or your chapatis fresh is to put them in the freezer, and you can eat them for months.
For parenting tips, celebrity interviews, recipes, conversations with experts, DIYs, and lots more. Subscribe to Kids Talk Press now.
Hi everyone, and welcome to Kids Talk Press. You know, when you are cooking in the kitchen, what happens is that we all have a little advice that comes on from mothers, grandmothers, and we kind of just go with it. Like, you know, the chana cup, you put the potli in the chana, or you have a chalk, and there's a particular way of doing it. But there's a science behind it, and I have somebody with me who is going to make that, and he's going to tell us how that happens and what is the science behind all of this. And actually everything that happens in the kitchen is based on science, and we don't even think about it. So let's dive into it, because I'm super excited to get to know what else he has to say. And refrigeration is one of the things I did want to ask you about, because I think there are two very strong camps about it. And your science behind it, and rightly so, is that in such an age, this is what it is.
It is what it is. And again,
what it is.
And refrigeration is, so I think people sometimes, if they just grow up in India, and if they have an opportunity to say travel to the West or Europe, or a place where the room temperature is actually pretty much refrigeration temperature, right? I mean, in those days, homes would be 7 or 8 degrees, in England or in the Nordics, right? People would just keep things around, and people would let things stay around at room temperature for long amounts of time, because they would not spoil, right? And so it is pretty evident that this idea that you have to consume food less than 3 hours after it's been cooked is very much a product of tropical thinking, where absolutely food starts to spoil 30 minutes after I cook it in Chennai.
Yeah.
In Delhi in the winter, it's going to stay 4 or 5 hours without being spoiled in the winter, right? Weird thing, right? So in winter, coconut oil in Delhi is solid, something that I didn't realize till I came to Delhi.
Yeah.
Coconut oil is liquid all the time in South India, because the temperature never goes below 18 ever, right? Which is when coconut oil melts. So I think when people kind of know about the rest of the world, then it opens up their mind to say that, yeah, this is fine. And I think the Mediterranean people, the Japanese people, Southeast Asians, Nordics and people, these are people who use the refrigerator, who do eat a lot of old fermented food for days on end, and they live 20 years longer than Indians do, right? So I have no idea what is it that we're actually trying to protect in that case.
And I think it's a lot about convenience as well.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not possible to be working, kids, come back home. It's very difficult. And I think maybe in the earlier days, because the women were at home, it just was an easier way of life.
It is so convenience has always been resisted in India, in at least many parts of Asia and so on, in the more patriarchal parts of the world. My great-grandfather would say no gas stove, right? You must use the wood-fired oven, and die from bronchitis at the age of like 50, right? In an unventilated kitchen. And then my grandmother's time, my grandfather would say no pressure cooker. You must cook the dal on an open pot, and spend more fuel, spend more time in the kitchen, and no mixie, because you're supposed to grind it with the hand and so on, because the flavor is more and so on. And now we find the same category of people like my great-grandfather and grandfather now saying things like no microwave, no fridge, no using old food, no eating fermented food, everything must be cooked fresh. And I think there was a reel that I put out that say that the chapatis tend to go stale very quickly, right? So that's starch retrogradation, right? So starch recrystallizes and becomes hard, and that's just the way it is. And so chapatis have to be eaten hot, right? And it puts a tremendous pressure on people to keep making it fresh, right? One by one for people in the house. And so when I said, you know what, if you freeze the chapati, actually it won't retrograde, because retrogradation happens only between like 3 and like 20, 30 Celsius. It does not happen at freezing temperatures. So the best way to keep your bread or sourdough bread or your chapatis fresh is to put them in the freezer, and you can eat them for months.
Yeah, that's what I learned when I went to the US, and they would just take it out of the freezer, and I'm like, are you crazy? We go to our dukaan, we pick up our bread every day, and we just think that if it comes out of the fridge, it's not that as fresh.
Yeah.
But they do that all the time.
The word fresh is, people, if you really interrogate them, they will not have a very clear definition of what fresh means, or that people will disagree with each other on what fresh means, and those disagreements will vary by culture, by society, west, east, south, north, and it will also vary by economic class. So a poorer person is actually less likely to have hang-ups about eating older food because they don't want to waste food, right? A rich, privileged person with a cook is going to say, I want everything fresh, right? So I think it is just that. So as long as people recognize that their preference, it's actually perfectly fine to say, I will only eat fresh food. As long as you don't make someone else, cook it for you, I think it's fine. I mean, of course, you're willing to pay a cook for it, that's fine too. But, if your own family members, you say, no, it must be made fresh for me. Unpaid labor, that's a very typical Indian mindset.
For parenting tips, celebrity interviews, recipes, conversations with experts, DIYs, and lots more. Subscribe to Kids Talk Press now.